Correlationally exposed factor research design. So this is a non-experimental design where researcher examines the relationship between the two or more variables in a natural setting without the manipulation or control. So exposed factor is coming from Latin phrase that essentially means retroactive or affecting something that's already happened. So whatever the things which happened already, we will be examining. And the second one is post factor design is a quasi-experimental study and how independent variable present prior to the study in the participant affected dependent variables. So example, the patient is diagnosed with having lung cancer. We will be examining what's the cause of lung cancer. So common cause we used to say that is smoking leads to lung cancer. So that's the quasi-experimental study. Simply means participant are not randomly assigned. So the procedures in exposed factor design. So here mainly the researcher examines the strength of relationship between variables by determining how change in one variable is correlated with the change in the other variable. So it has been done in various stages. So stage one, we will define the problem and we will survey the literature, whatever the things already done. And the stage two, we will state the hypotheses and the assumptions and the procedure for the research. And in the stage three, we will be selecting the subject sampling and further methods for collecting the data. And the stage four, we will identify the criteria and categories for the purpose of the study. And in stage 5, we will be gathering all the information and we will discard the data which is not always actually present. So whatever the data which is available or present, we will be gathering the information, and the data which is not available, not present, we will just omit the data. And in stage 6, we will gather data on those factors which is always present. So the patient are having the data always present, which leads to some effect that we will be gathering. And in stage 7, we will compare two sets of data and subtract the former data. So two set of data, whatever the previous data we are having and the present data, and we will be compare it and we will be subtracting the present data from the previous data. So that we will know what is the cause of the particular disease. Example, the same example, if you are taking that the patient is having a lung cancer, there may be many causes which may lead to lung cancer. One cause we will usually we say that is smoking leads to lung cancer, and the other cause may be a family history or alcohol or any other history. So we will see that what is the main factor which is always present which leads to a particular effect. So the factor which is not always present, we will just omit the factor. And in stage 8, we will analyze, interpret and report findings. And approaches of exposed factor research design. So here, once one command source, it will be always differ from the independent variable. So here, sometimes the independent variable, there will not be any correlation from the dependent variable, and sometimes the performance, there may be a range in the difference. So that when we are taking the example where the patient those are having a habit of smoking leads to lung cancer, always we can't predict always that the smoking leads to lung cancer, because some people, if you are seeing the diagnosis of having the lung cancer, if you are analyzing the history, that the person may be a non-smoker. So we can't predict even the smoking only leads to lung cancer. Even the people those are not having the habit of smoking also leads to lung cancer. So it always shows that there will not be any relationship between independent and dependent variable. And the characteristics of exposed factor research. So here the exposed factor research, the researcher takes the effect of the dependent variable. So effect of the dependent variable, so here we can take the effect is lung cancer. And here the examiner or the researcher will be examining the data retrospectively to establish the causes relationship. So the retrospectively is nothing but, so now we are having the effect of lung cancer. So now we are going back and analyzing what is the past history of the patient or the past habit of the patient which leads to lung cancer. That is called the retrospective design. And what are the difficulties in exposed factor research? So here there's a directional causality difficult to establish. So sometimes we can't predict all the causes which leads to the effect, and there may be a lack of control of independent variable, and sometimes we may be feeling that impossible to isolate or control the variable, and randomization is not possible, and there may be some contradictory information you may be getting, and always we can't predict the hypothesis, and the research will not have a control over the independent variable. And here you can see the exposed factor research and independent variables. So here the differ in the independent variables. So sometimes what will happen, the same example, if you are taking the smoking leads to lung cancer. So sometimes the people those who are diagnosed with this lung cancer, there may be a habit of smoking, that is called the presence of independent variable. The second one, that the particular person may not be a smoker, that is called absence of independent variable. And the third one, degrees of independent variable. So the first one we have seen that the presence of independent variable, that the person may be a smoker which may lead to lung cancer, and the second, absence of independent variable, that is the person is a non-smoker which leads to lung cancer, and the third one, degrees of independent variable, the degree of smoking, that is the number of cigarettes he smoked per day, that leads to the dependent variable. So all the three factors as a researcher we have to investigate, and we should see the effect on the dependent variable. So how far the person those who are not smoking, how he has developed a lung cancer, the person those who are having the habit of smoking, how he developed lung cancer, and even the number of cigarettes he smoked which leads to lung cancer. So the same on the independent variable we will be investigating, and we will see the effect on the dependent variable. And the next, we will see the exposed factor research and dependent variables. So the differing on dependent variable, investigate differing on independent variable, presence of independent variable, absence of independent variable, degrees of independent variable. So here the differing of independent variables, so how far that the level of lung cancer, that may be a primary stage, stage 1 or stage 2 or stage 3 or stage 4, this one determines the differing on independent variable. So either the presence of independent variable or the absence of independent variable or the degree of independent variable. The same, the dependent variable, the researcher will be investigating how far it's differing the independent variable, that is present or absent or decrease. Then exposed factor research is useful one. So if it's impossible, so other research design is impossible or impractical to utilize or costly or unethical, or in case if you are not control or manipulate the independent variable, and we are finding it difficult to find the cause and effect relationship, and the independent variable, the outside the researcher control, this all the situation we can go for a exposed factor research. Advantages of exposed factor research. So it is mainly useful for more rigorous experimental approach is not possible, and so certain conditions it will be useful, and useful for the setting up for the later, it introduces some artificially we are doing something in the research, in such a situation we can utilize the exposed factor research. And if you are dealing with a simple cause, so only one single cause and effect, if you are studying the relationship, we can utilize the exposed factor factor research, and even it will give a sense of direction and provide a source of hypothesis. And even there are some disadvantages in ex post factor research because one cannot know for whether the causative factor, because we may not be knowing exactly that the smoking leads to lung cancer or any other hidden cause is there which leads to lung cancer. That researcher cannot predict, and sometimes we can't say only smoking leads to lung cancer. There may be multiple cause which leads to an effect, and a particular outcome may result from different causes. So that's what the lung cancer may be caused due to the habit of alcohol or hereditary disease or some genetic factors. So many factors behind the screen which may lead to certain effect. And and all the time we can't disconfirm the hypothesis, and classifying into dichotomous groups can be problematic because if you are classifying two groups, so one group we may be taking that the person who's having the habit of smoking which leads to lung cancer. Other group, the person may not be having the habit of smoking which may also leads to lung cancer. Two groups if you are taking, it may lead to some problem. And the researcher attempt to match groups on key variables. This leads to shrinkage of sample because when you are matching the group, it may be causing the shrinkage of sample. We may not be getting the adequate amount of sample, we may be losing certain sample. And the conclusions may be based on too limited a sample or number of occurrences. And even it may fail to single out the really significant factors. Thank you.